Hi folks, thanks for joining us. It's great to have you with us. I appreciate you tuning in. This is the first of 3 weeks where we're going to look at our key values or purposes. We refer to these as value. They're both values and purposes really of our church. Pursue God, build community, grow people. And we're going to take 3 weeks at the beginning of this new year to reflect on those 3 things. And I'm really excited today to be able to talk about the first of those, pursue God. And I want to pose and then look for a biblical answer to a very simple question. The question that I want to put out there is, how can I experience God? How can I experience God? Now, I think there are a few problems with this question in the way that we sometimes understand experience, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But it's a very legitimate question. It's a legitimate question because it speaks to our deepest yearning. This is actually what we want in the deeper sense. Whatever else you think you want, the thing that you need the most is that you need a relationship with God. You need God. We need God. This is like, without God, we're like a planet without orbit. And not only this, but this is also validated by God's purpose. God gave everything in Jesus Christ so that we could have a relationship with Him. Now, a relationship is a matter of experience. It's not just, Jesus didn't do this just so that we could know about God or have a correct theory about who God is. No, it's so that we could have a real experience of God. And of course, the Bible speaks of an experiential faith. It talks about rejoicing in God, peace with God, hope in God, an experience of God's love. For example, in Romans 8 speaks of the Spirit Himself testifying with our spirit that we are God's children. This is an experiential thing. So I think it's a fair question. But here's the problem. Many Christians I speak of complain about a void of experience of God. It's one of the key things. It might be a little bit here and there, maybe some inspiration here and there, maybe moments of emotion, but with a lot of the conversations that I have are with people who are struggling to kind of access, as they might see it, God's presence, whatever that means. And of course, here is part of the problem that I'm going to address. Now, interestingly, it's not so much the case with new Christians. They experience a contrast. Something new has dawned in them, and that is a very obvious difference, actually, to what they had before. And that was certainly my experience as a new Christian. It depends, of course, on what your experience is, because it differs for every person. But I can remember definitely sensing the reality of God. And it was only at a later time when I feel like it kind of drained away and I was left feeling somewhat alone. And I tell you what, I truly wish that someone had told me then the things that I'm going to talk about today. It's partly what is really motivating this message today. Well, look, 33 years later, I can sit here and testify to an amazing journey with God in this respect. I've known such amazing joy in the presence of God. It's become something that is far more constant. It's something that compels me onwards. But I can also testify that while this has been my greatest joy, it's also been my greatest struggle. And there continues to be an element of struggle in this for reasons that I'll talk about today and will continue to do so in the coming weeks. Now, to keep this message simple, without being simplistic, of course, I want to identify a key problem and point to a key solution. There's so much to be said here, and I'll be talking a lot about this, as I said, in the weeks to come. But today I just want to kind of get us pointed in the right direction. The problem is encountered in the very way we even begin to go about attaining some experience of God. It's one of those situations where we try to make something better only to make it worse by the way that we do it. It's like, drinking salt water when you're thirsty. It's just going to make it worse. You're just going to be left, worse off. worse off before. It's like perhaps, punching someone because they won't be friends with you. Well, you're only going to make it worse. Sometimes we can do things trying to perhaps make things better, but we can actually end up making them worse. There are many biblical examples, actually, of people trying to secure God's presence by doing things that actually caused a rift between them and God. Think of King Saul, for example, rushing through a token sacrifice to get God on side. Well, it did just the opposite. Think of the story of David, 1 Chronicles 13, who was, going to get the ark to Jerusalem by transporting it on an ox cart as though he was transporting a pagan god. He wanted to secure God's presence, but only to dishonor God. Think about Aaron at Mount Sinai, when Moses was up on the mountain and he wanted to assure the people of God's favorable presence with them by making a golden calf. So it's possible that in the way that we pursue God, we're actually kind of creating a golden calf that actually just further alienates us from God. I think this actually happens a lot. I have done it. I have made golden calves in a quest to secure an experience of God's presence, and it only made things worse. Well, to begin with, and as I said, this is really just a beginning to this issue, and I really do want to talk a lot more to this, because of course, this is one of our key values, and so we're going to talk about it a lot. But to begin with, we need to acknowledge who God is. I know this sounds simplistic, but stay with me here. We need to make sure that our mode of approach is honouring to God. Otherwise, we're just going to alienate ourselves from God, that we're honouring actually who God is. Now, of course, God is wonderfully gracious. And when we get it wrong, when we dishonour God, it doesn't mean that he casts us off. No, he forgives us when we recognise our error, and he teaches us to go about it the right way. That's what he did with David, right? Didn't he? David got it wrong, but David got another chance. And he did get it right in that case with the ark in 1 Chronicles 15. So let's start here. Let's remind ourselves of the most crucial fact about God. So we're going to do some real basics here. See, God is not a thing. And he doesn't exist like things, like anything. He is more than a great designer, more than a first cause, more than a power that makes things work, more than a force that exerts itself on you or anything else. No, God doesn't exist like any other thing. Now, this is where I'm going to attempt to kind of say the unsayable. God is not just the origin of things that exist. God is existence itself, in a sense. He is the reason why there is something rather than nothing. By simply existing, everything else already participates in God's being. In fact, the very consciousness that enables you to even think about these things is actually a direct participation in something divine. Your very conscious experience would not exist because God is the ultimate consciousness. Consciousness and personhood are actually a participation in something about God. Now, if all that doesn't make sense to you, then try this. The fact is, you are experiencing God right now, far more immediately than you can even imagine. He is just so pervasively and constantly present that you could easily not notice. He is actively at work in every atom in your body, every bit of chemistry in the air and environment, every physical law that holds things together in you and around you. God is at work. It is the active presence of God. You are experiencing more of God in every millisecond than you could possibly imagine. Now let me just add a technical theological footnote here. I'm not advocating what's known as pantheism. I'm not saying that these physical things are God. I'm saying that these things have the very ground of their existence in God, and even our experience of anything or anyone is itself a participation in something about God that He has imparted to us. There is a movement of God in all things, an active sovereignty holding all things together, creating and sustaining all the time in you and around you. You are experiencing God more profoundly and constantly than you know, because He is infinitely present in the microscopic world of your molecular structure and macroscopically present in the movement of galaxies in the vast universe out there. God is great, much greater than you can think, and much more present than you can think. The problem is not that you are not experiencing God right now. The problem is that you are not aware that you are experiencing God. The problem is that you are seeking after something smaller than God. The problem is that you're looking for something. I'm just suggesting what the problem may be, and invariably this is often the case. Maybe you're looking for a tangible experience, something to show you that God is real, a sign, maybe a wonder, a power maybe that enables you to do supernatural things. You're looking for things to happen here and there and then, but God is a constant, infinite, eternal presence who does not change or fluctuate. Now, He does move, in a sense, but He doesn't change or fluctuate. He's not here or there. He's constant. This is the question that I often ask people in this situation when they're struggling to gain a sense of God's presence, wanting to, but struggling to gain a sense of God's presence. And I ask the question, what do you even think that means? What are you even looking for? What do you imagine that experience to even be? You're wanting something to happen, a miracle. But see, a miracle isn't God. It might be caused by God, but it's not God. It's just something. If you seek any tangible thing to satisfy your need for God, well, that is the essence of idolatry. Idolatry is an endeavour to make God present how we want Him to be present, in a lesser sense than who He actually is. Something we can handle and understand, something we can point to and say, oh, there is God. As Aaron said, "Hear, O Israel, are your gods," when he made the golden calves. No, this actually grieves God. He wants you to know Him as He is. Infinitely present in and around you, greater than you can imagine, yet one who you can recognize, commune with, love, and be loved by. You are experiencing God right now. I mean, if God withdrew, we would literally be left in hell. I mean, you are experiencing God right now. It's just so constant. It's, God is so ever present in and around you and everything, holding everything together. God is so present, it's easy not to notice it. We might easily forget, for example, that air existed. Wouldn't we? It's there. We could easily forget that air exists if the wind didn't blow every now and again. And when the wind blows, we don't say, oh, the air has come. Nor do we say that there was more air now than before. No, the air was always there. It's just perhaps that it was stirred up. We could actually call it a low pressure system when that happens. And actually, one of the main ways that God reminds us of His presence is to exert pressure, like a low pressure system. And do you know what low pressure systems cause? They cause storms, turbulence, stirs things up. Now again, this is the effect of God moving. But this is often what happens. God's presence stirs up turbulence. Anyone that is not secured gets blown around in the turbulence, doing a lot of damage. That's what storms do. Now, God is not the storm. Now, God is not turbulence. He is perfect constancy. But when He moves, there is turbulence for anything or anyone who is not secured. And I believe this is happening now. I believe this is happening now if we will open our eyes and become aware of it. And I feel one of the key things that I want us to do in the following year is precisely that, to become more aware of what God is doing and saying as He stirs things up. Listen, revival isn't out there somewhere. No, it's happening right now, and we have a choice to step into it and know the presence of God who is here infinitely and eternally. I've got a lot more to say about this. But as I said, I want to keep this simple with this one vital truth about God. I want all of you who are thinking, where is God? All you who are looking for some sign or some wonder, some experience, something. You don't see God because you're looking for something. And that's not God. God is already present. Everything is an expression of God's eternal power and nature. It's everywhere all the time. It's the very constancy of it, as I said before, that causes us perhaps not to notice this. Now, this is where we go, delve into the problematic aspect of this. And this is also where I can point to Romans chapter 1. Of course, we're about to move into a series in Romans. If you're following in our Thrive schedule, we begin looking at Romans this week. So I thought it might be good to refer to Romans chapter 1, where Paul talks about the human condition. And he says this in Romans 1:20. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, His eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse. Now he goes on to explain that the reason they don't see God is because they keep looking for something here or there. They're not looking for God, but gods, as he goes on in Romans 1 from verse 21. And I'll be a bit selective here. For although they knew God, he says, they neither glorified Him as God, nor gave thanks to Him, but their thinking became futile and their foolish hearts were darkened. They exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images, things, you see. They exchanged the truth of God for a lie, and they worshipped and served created things rather than the Creator, who is forever praised. Amen. Very interesting final statement. Notice how he says here, God is forever praised. And he means by the whole of creation, all the time, God's praises are being declared. You are in the midst of a miracle, a wonder that is praising the name of God by its very existence, called the universe. It's called your very body. It's called everything around you. Psalm 19 says, the heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of His hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they reveal knowledge. They have no speech, they use no words, no sound is heard from them, yet their voice goes out into all the earth, their words to the ends of the world. Well, if you want to know God, if you want to experience God, now let me say this for a start. Join in with the praise. Join in with the praise. Because you are already experiencing God. You just are not realizing that. And it is only as you respond to this that this becomes more conscious. God has started the conversation, as we've just heard. And He is waiting for your answer, your response. The more you praise, the more you will see. And here's why. Because acts of praise and worship open our awareness to the God who is already there. They are acts of us presenting ourselves, becoming present to God, stopping and being aware of God. You see the problem that I'm going to talk lots about in the following year. The problem is not that God is absent. The problem is that we are absent, invariably. Now, the reason for that absence is a big topic, which I'll, as I said, address more. Suffice it to say now that we are in a state of deep avoidance, a kind of dissociative condition perhaps. We run so fast, spinning our identity webs, chasing objects and objectives, distracting ourselves, and just running after experiences. We're like people who just shake their heads incessantly and are left feeling so blind and dizzy and with the constant movement. And God says, stop, cease. He's calling us to Sabbath. What he always intends. It's, intended. For goodness sake, it's the fourth commandment. We need to take the principle from that. It's not just about a day. It's about a principle of stopping. The principle is declared in Psalm 46, verse 10. Be still, cease, stop, simply to know that I am God. Stop and acknowledge the one who is infinitely present. This is what it means to pursue God. It means that you look more deliberately and carefully. Look again, stop, pause. It means to incline our ears to the one who is always speaking, to see his glory everywhere, to know his presence all the time, because he's talking to you all the time through everything, constant. But again, it's the constancy that perhaps causes us not to notice it because we're looking for something here or over there or down here. No, God is greater than that. And he wants to know him as he is. And so one of our biggest agendas for this year is to create spaces and places for stillness, for worship, God's spaces to wait on God, as with the waiting room. So encouraging. I think this was just the perfect start to this endeavour. To take space to simply wait in stillness, to stop for the sake of stopping and learning to discipline ourselves to be still and to become more aware of God. We have our main worship meetings. It's like, that's that moment where we all come together and we make a public demonstration that God is above all, the most important thing to us. But there are going to be lots of other spaces that we're going to make where we are going to become more spiritually porous, more aware of God, more responsive to God. That is the way to live. And that's the journey that we are going on. Bless you.